programmers. I wanted to redo my intro to Unity tutorial to show the later version of Unity because some things were different. So I would start with Unity Hub. That's a good place to organize all your projects. And from Unity Hub, this may be your first project, so you may not have any projects listed. You're going to say you want a new project. And then every time they update Unity, some things may change on here, but find 2D, and your 2D may be a little different. Like I've got two choices for 2D, but I'm just going to pick the 2D core one. And then there's a place for you to change the name of your project. I'm going to call this, it's basically one step past to Hello World. We're going to do more than print Hello World. We're going to end up changing some text every time a button is clicked. So I just made my project name button clicked, and then I'll say create project. This may take a little bit of time to open up. All right, finally it opened. I paused the video so you didn't have to watch everything load. We've got our empty scene here, and there's a hierarchy of the components. Right now, all we have is a main camera. This scene, we need to add two different things. Click the plus sign to add a new component. And both of the things I want to add are under UI for user interface. The first one is a TextMeshPro. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And you probably will have to import the TextMeshPro Essentials. And then you may say, well, where is the text? Supposedly there's text there. And every time you add a user interface component, the first time you add one, you're going to get this canvas object. Well, if you can't find your text, highlight the text in the hierarchy and go over into the scene view and hit F on your keyboard, and it will help you find that text that you just positioned there. And instead of the word new text, I'm going to change that, and the properties are over on the right-hand side in this column here. I'm going to change that to say times clicked, because my game is going to keep track of how many times the user hit the button. And there's resize handles here. We can make this a lot bigger if we want. I'm making it much bigger so that I can actually change the font size to be something a bit larger. The position where this decided to put the text, if you scroll out, I'm moving my fingers on the mouse, let's see, to scroll out, and I end up seeing that the times clicked is in the bottom left corner. I'm going to select the arrows here, the move tool, and drag the green and red arrow to position this. Or I'm going to look up in the right hand corner and see that the position, I could change that to 0, 0 if I wanted it to be directly in the center of the screen. All right, so that's one component. I said that there were two components, so go back over to your canvas and select that, and then the user interface. And this time I want a button that the user is going to be able to click on. So there's a button / TextMeshPro. I'll click on that. It ends up again trying to put it in the lower left corner. If you want to move it into a different position, go ahead and move it to a different position. And I'll show you a few more things over here. There's above the move tool is the view tool, and it will allow you to scroll and look at the view from a different position here. And I'm going to make the font a little bit bigger on that button. So with the button selected, I'm going to choose the rectangle tool and allow for a bigger font, number one. And then also my position, I'll put it 0 so it's kind of centered. And then there's this little expandable expand and contract right next to this button, this arrow, and you can see that there's a TextMeshPro thing inside the button, and that makes sense because there's text on the button. So I'm going to say click here. All right, and any of these components that we just added, we could change the color. So if you don't want the button to be that bland white, you could change the color. I'm going to make the font a little bit bigger on that, just like we did for the times clicked, the TextMeshPro label. All right, that looks good. If you want to see what this looks like when you run it, the run button is this little arrow at the top. You'll toggle it on and off to go from the scene view to the game view. And if you don't want the blue background, we can toggle this off again and click on the canvas. And the canvas, actually I take that back. The main camera is where you're going to find that background color. And we could pick a different background color if we want, maybe a nice pretty blue color. And oh, it already was blue, so then you won't be able to tell that I just changed it. So purple, and when you run, we're going to see that purple color. But right now, if somebody clicks on the button, then nothing's going to happen. So we want to create a C# script that has a function that runs every time the button's pressed. So I'm going to go over to that button, and along with the where you change the font color and the font type, if you scroll down, there's an on click section. We're going to be able to add an action to happen every time somebody clicks on that. But first, I actually want to add a script. I'm going to add a script with add component. I'm going to choose new script, and I'll give the script a name. And the name of your script is going to end up being the name of the class inside of this script. So choose your name wisely. I'm going to call this test script. And we'll notice over in the view of the project, that is the name of our C# file. And if you double click on this, I have this configured to work with Visual Studio Code so that it opens it up and we'll be able to see and edit the code here. And if this isn't hooked up, I'd highly recommend you use Visual Studio. All right, so notice that the name that we gave this script is also the name of our class. We've got some inheritance from mono behavior and two functions. I do want a start function. I don't need an update function, so I'll delete that. And I want this class to have two properties. I want it to have a public TextMeshPro UGUI, and don't worry if it's underlined. Mine's going to be underlined until I do something else. So I'll give the variable name myLabel, and then a private int that is just the word number. Now, if you want to get rid of that red underline, hover over that, and the tooltip says, well, here's a little suggestion. Maybe you just need using TextMeshPro, that library, to be pulled in. And so if I do that, it adds this line up here. The lines that are not bold means we're not using anything from that, so we could remove that and your program will work the same. So in Start, if it's the very first time you've come to this scene, or you're coming to this scene from another scene and you've transitioned here, we're going to set the number to 0. And just for debugging, I'm going to print in start. And I'll show you where that print statement is going to show up. Log console is what you might see in some other tutorials. And I want one more function that will be publicly available. And I'm going to call this button pressed. And this is, I'm going to hook it up as the action that happens every time someone hits a button. I'm going to change the number and increase it by 1. And then I want to change the words that are displayed on the label. So the label has more than one component. We saw it had has background color, font type, and I want the component that's the TextMeshPro UGUI. And I'm going to get that part only, and then look at the text of that part and change it to times clicked. And here I can concatenate that string with the current version of the number. All right, go ahead and save your changes and jump back over to the scene. And to hook this action up to the button, I'm going to select the button and go back to that section where it said on click, and I'm going to hit a plus sign. So now I'm going to drag in the component that has the script I want to run. Well, I had actually just added the component to the button itself. So I'm going to drag the button into this new box that opened up. And I'm going to choose the function from that from the buttons test script, and the function was button pressed. So the one other thing we have to change is when you look at the test script, it has any publicly available parts of that, and there was a public part, my label. When we were looking at the script, it actually had my label with camel case, and it started with a lowercase, but this is the same label object. So it wants to know what is the TextMeshPro object that we want to change every time we call that function, and I'm going to drag that in to that empty box there. So I clicked on what I wanted to add, but I didn't let go of the mouse. I held it down and dragged it. Okay, let's test it out. Go ahead and hit run. And we can click our button, and voila, every time we click, we're going to increase that number of times clicked. All right, hope you enjoyed your first Unity tutorial.